Well, good afternoon, everybody. Want to welcome you all to our monthly Lunch and Learn. I'm Dr. Mike Bowie. I'm the National Executive Director of SBC 21, Strengthen the Black Church for the 21st Century. And I want to welcome you all to this monthly Lunch and Learn that happens every third Thursday of the month. This is a very important webinar. So as we get going, won't you just put in the chat where you're coming from, what city you hail from, what church you come from, what church are you at? So I want to say happy Thursday to everybody. And as we come in, we're going to have a great time today, and know I'm excited about this webinar. Just want you all to know that today we have a special guest that's going to be sharing with us, and we're going to be talking about safety in the church and how do we safeguard it and how are we safe in the church. And want you all to know that church shootings have become all too common in America. And I believe that during this highly contentious election season, a lot of crazy things are going on. The body of Christ, the church, I believe the body of Christ must be educated and equipped like never before to deal with church security. So that's what we're going to talk about today. As you listen from Wichita, Kansas, people from all around the country want to welcome in today as we talk about church security. So I want to introduce the Dr. David E. Jackson. He's the executive leader. He's a minister. He's a professor. He's an author. He's a consultant hailing from Atlanta, Georgia. I want you all to know that Dr. David E. Jackson, he's leader of David E. Jackson Enterprises. He's a leadership consultant. He does training. He's a training entity for government, nonprofit, and ministry organizations nationally. I want you all to know that you have a guru and an expert on this webinar today. Dr. David Jackson is also an adjunct professor of organizational leadership at Morris Brown College. And he's the lead consultant of the Watchman Project. Watchman Project, he can probably tell you a little more about that. It deals with church security and it's clergy-led response to gun violence. So I hope we have some clergy on today that you can get some tips and tools on how to safeguard your congregations. Also, Dr. Jackson, he's a graduate of Cornell University. He's also a graduate of Union Theological Seminary in New York City, New York. Also, he is finishing, y'all, his second PhD in organizational leadership at Southeastern University. As you all know, he has a wealth of experience, but I'm proud to say he's a member of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, the first Black fraternity in America, started in 1906 at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York. David is an inductee of the prestigious Morehouse Board of Preachers. He's at the Morehouse Board of Preachers. But the big thing about David, he loves the Lord, and he's married to Dr. Tiffany Hunter Jackson. She's a physician and a minister. And they have two lovely children, Tiffany and Benjamin David. So I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to introduce you all to Dr. David Jackson. David, thank you for being with us today. The floor is yours, and thank you for being a part of this monthly Lunch and Learn, my friend. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Doc. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you all today. And what a timely session to have, considering where we are in our nation at this time. And so without further ado, we're going to get right to the presentation. They're going to upload my deck for me. And as soon as they do, we're going to get started. Again, I want to thank you all for having this important discussion on security in the church. And again, my name is Dr. David Jackson. I'm a part of many different things, but today I come in the capacity as the Executive Director of the Watchman Project Incorporated. And in today's webinar, we will explore the critical topic of church security and its far-reaching implication for our African-American congregations, particularly within the United Methodist Church, which is the primary audience for today. As places of worship, our churches should be sanctuaries where people feel safe, secure, and feel free to commune with God. However, the harsh realities of our current social political landscape has made it necessary for us to prioritize the safety and well-being of our congregations. So let's dive right into this discussion. All right. I want us to consider this. Over the past several years, we have witnessed a concerning rise in gun violence and mass shootings targeting places of worship, including many predominantly African American congregations. One of the most prominent that we can think of is Mother Emanuel AME Church in Tulsa, which I've been to visit many times, and we can talk about that later if you want. These tragic events have shaken our communities and highlights the urgent need to prioritize church security. Additionally, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the ongoing mental health crisis, with many individuals struggling with emotional and psychological tolls of the pandemic. This crisis has the potential to manifest in destructive or even violent behavior, further underscoring the importance of proactive security measures in our church. Because let's be honest, even in our congregations, those of you who are pastors and even lay leaders, if you be honest, you see a uptick of mental illness among some of your congregants or family members connected to congregants. Because remember, when people come to church, they are coming from a community, and they can be bringing issues happening in their families, in their homes, and those things can follow them to church. So please keep that in mind, right? Moreover, the heightened social political tension in the United States, we have a very highly tense presidential election coming up. It is being fueled by this polarizing rhetoric and divisive issues, and it has created an environment of uncertainty and potential civil unrest. As places of worship, our churches must be prepared. We must be prepared to protect our congregation, our property, protect our things on the cybersecurity level, and maintain a sense of safety and sanctuary. And let me put a pin here and say this, that more and more of our congregants are going to begin to question, if they haven't already, and put a demand on faith leaders to speak to what are you doing to be proactive about the security of our church, considering the social political landscape that we are in. And in light of these challenges, it is crucial that we shift our mentality from viewing our churches as soft targets to fortifying them as sacred spaces. Because there's still people today that believe, oh, who would walk into a church and shoot up a church? Who would walk into the church and hurt someone? Who would vandalize a religious property? And I'm here to tell you, many people are doing it. The statistics are alarming. And pastors and faith leaders and lay leaders have to become proactive, strategic, and intentional about making sure that their place of worship is indeed a safe, sacred space that are resilient and well equipped to safeguard our communities. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the connection between church security and mental health. Let's drill down a little bit more. As we consider this critical issue of church security, it is essential that we recognize the deep connection between security and mental health. The mental health crisis was exacerbated by the pandemic. I said that before, but I want to emphasize it again. It was already an issue, but it was exacerbated. And it's confronting a historical trend in some communities of color to stigmatize mental health. Okay. And so now that it has been exacerbated, we have to confront the stigmas, if there are any, in our faith communities around talking about mental health, emotional health, and the strategies that's required to make sure that our people are taking care of themselves and not spiritualizing mental health or engaging in spiritual bypass when it comes to mental health conversations, or else we could be missing some important cues that there could be a mental health connection to a potential threat to our congregations, right? We have to address these issues. So one of the things I'm going to talk about a little bit later is the Watchman Pipeline, but we don't often think about mental health professionals as being a part of how we secure our churches. These can be people inside of your congregation who are certified, licensed mental health professionals, or even pastoral counselors, but also people in the community that you have established relationships with that you can refer people in your congregation to. So it's very important that faith leaders begin to think about, how can I, if I'm not, how can I incorporate mental health professionals, counselors, support services into the security planning and into the security actions by proactively identifying individuals who may be having crisis or intervention before any disruptive or violent behavior occurs. Let me also put a pin here and say this. A major issue that we don't talk about enough in the church is domestic violence, which is also connected to mental health. And that you could be having people in your congregation who are going through a domestic situation. If they come to you as their pastor or as a leader in the church and share with you that they are in a domestic situation, that is not only a spiritual issue, that is a security issue. Please hear me. That is a security issue, not to be taken lightly, should be handled with the utmost level of integrity and confidentiality, but the parties that are involved in securing your church should be involved, because there have been numerous stories I've heard and even personally experienced in my pastoral ministry where domestic situations will come to church. They will come to church. I had a situation when I was pastoring years ago where guys came into church with guns to shoot another brother in the church for beating their cousin and sister. And thank God I had law enforcement experience and I had other brothers who could help me to diffuse that situation. And fortunately, no one was hurt. But please keep that in mind. Early identification and intervention are key. By fostering a culture of mental health and resilience within our congregation, we empower our members to recognize the signs of mental distress and seek necessary support. So we don't want to demonize mental health, nor do we want to demonize going to therapy, getting counseling, or even taking medicine if that's required. We want to find ways to incorporate that in our messages. We need to ask ourselves, do we have a mentally healthy, friendly culture in our church? Or do we have a toxic culture when it comes to discussing mental health? Very important for us to keep in mind. Next slide, please. Let's talk about the connection between church security, gun violence, gun laws, and policy. This is huge. This is huge. It's another critical aspect that we need to discuss. As we navigate the often confusing web of gun laws and policies, I know a lot of states are now removing the mandate to have for you to get a license to carry. Some states are open carry states. Some states are open concealed states. It's so confusing. So the first thing I want to encourage pastors and lay leaders to consider is, what does your state as well as your city, because your city can have even stricter laws than your state. So you don't just need to know what your state mandate is around gun laws, but you need to know what your city or the town that you're in also says. And then you as a congregation have to make a critical decision around that. Are you allowing your congregants to bring their guns to service, even if it's an open carry state? If you do or don't, how are you informing them of your policy? Are you putting out posters? I did security consulting for a large mega church in Atlanta recently, and I had a huge discussion with their security team. They had these little signs saying guns, no weapons allowed. And I was like, who would see that? No one would see that. You need to figure out some larger ways to inform people that weapons are not allowed. But here's something to consider. Do we really want to send a message to the community that there's no weapons in this building? When I pastor, we put a sign up saying, there are weapons here, but don't bring yours. Now that might sound comical, but what that's saying is, don't think that we're just sitting ducks waiting for someone to walk in and shoot us up. No, there's guns in here, right, with the appropriate people. But if you're not sanctioned or authorized to have a weapon here, you do not bring your weapon. We have enough people here who are trained and have been delegated to protect the congregation in case of a crisis. So it's important for you to know what are the laws and the rules around gun ownership, where they can take their guns, where they can't. If you decide to allow people to have guns in your congregation, then they need to be going through ongoing training. They need to go to the range regularly, because with shooting, it is a skill that will deteriorate if you don't use it. So they need to be going to the range regularly. At the same time, we must actively advocate for some common sense gun laws. So with the Watchman Project, it's twofold. So I do church security consulting, but I also am leading clergy in Atlanta to respond to gun violence. And I think that it's connected. They're like twins, because a lot of churches are not thinking about securing themselves because they're also not involved in the broader conversation around gun violence and gun prevention. So I want to encourage you to also be thinking about what way can our ministry be involved. Now, most ministries have a cause or two or three things that is their cause. And if you don't, I encourage you as a faith leader to begin to talk with your leadership. What are the one, two, or three social causes that we are passionate about, we feel called to address, and we are equipped to address in some way? It could be food insecurity, it could be human trafficking, or it may be gun violence. And you need to say, hey, if my church is in a community that has an alarming increase of gun violence amongst young people, which is the main demographics is happening among, should gun violence reform be a part of our cause? Okay, so that's something you want to be thinking about. This multifaceted approach, combining individual responsibility and collective advocacy, will be key to addressing the intersection of church security, gun violence, and the evolving legal landscape. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right. So let's talk about, and we've mentioned several times, let's talk about the social political climate and its connection to church security, right? Especially in the context of this upcoming political election. The heightened tension and divisive rhetoric that have characterized the political landscape in recent years have the potential to spill over into our sacred spaces. We must be prepared to navigate various scenarios, from the possibility of civil unrest to the exploitation of our churches for political gain. And we all know that that's a real story, right? That when it's time for elections, politicians come to our churches, they want to speak, they want us to vote for them. But oftentimes when it comes down to policies and funding and things of that nature, a lot of promises go unkept. In this environment, it's essential that we as faith leaders encourage civic engagement, responsible participation in the political process among our congregations. In other words, we need to encourage our congregation to vote, help them to vote, facilitate voting, address voting fraud, but also know that if you become vocal in this in your community, it may make your congregation a target. It may make your congregation a target. Please keep that in mind. And so as a result, as you equip and empower and encourage your congregation to be civically engaged, even beyond elections, and let me tell you this, not just national elections, but state elections and local elections, we have to be involved there too, that we also encourage our congregation to go to city meetings, go to community meetings, go to school board meetings, so that you are aware of what's happening, especially around gun violence, especially around security, especially around law enforcement. We need to be aware of what governments are making decisions about in this arena, because it's going to directly impact the safety and well-being of our congregations. Our churches should be sanctuaries where people of all backgrounds and political affiliations can come together and worship and community. By maintaining a proactive and balanced approach to security, we can ensure that our sacred spaces remain havens of peace, even amidst the turbulence of a broader social political landscape. Let's go to the next slide. Now, I want to drill down deeper into why my organization is called the Watchman Project, so you can understand some of the additional strategies I'm going to share, right? As we delve into these practical aspects of church security, it's essential that we consider the spiritual dimension. Please hear me. Church security is as much spiritual as it is tactical. Church security is as much spiritual as it is tactical. And I think a part of the disconnect with churches thinking about security is they're trying to separate these two aspects from each other, when what I advocate for is that they need to be connected. All right. So in the Bible, we find a powerful metaphor of the watchman as described in Ezekiel chapter 33, verses 1 to 7. The watchman was responsible for standing guard, vigilantly scanning the horizon for any potential threats to the community. This role was critical in the protection of the house of God, ensuring the safety and well-being of the people. And not just the house of God, but the community. They stood on the gates of the city, right, to scan for any incoming dangers to the city and particularly to the house of God. In the context of our churches, we must recognize the watchmen, which is who I call your security people, Anybody that's helping to secure your church spiritually and tactically, I call them watchmen. It is a spiritual calling. The work of securing our sacred spaces is not just a logistical challenge, but it is a sacred duty entrusted to us as stewards of God's house. And by empowering our congregation to embrace the watchman mentality. So, what this does is it extends the duty for watching for our houses just from ushers or from armor bearers or from security or parking lot attendants or intercessors to everybody in the congregation is a watchman. I'm sure you've seen the signs as you moved around major cities where it says, if you see something, say something, right? I'm sure you've seen that, right? If you see something, say something. And what that means is that the job of securing our city is not just upon law enforcement. The job of securing our city, securing our public transportation, securing our public facilities is upon everybody, but it's a mentality that we must have. A lot of people don't have a mentality to watch. And the Bible encourages us to what? Watch as well as pray, because we have to be alert. We have to see what is coming towards us so that we can be proactive and not reactive. So when we think about this, each member of the church, from the ushers to the intercessors, play a vital role in safeguarding the sanctuary and creating an environment of security and peace. And as faith leaders, we have to make sure you have the systems, the structures, and the policies in place so that your congregation can be able to communicate things they're seeing in ways that's not disruptive, that doesn't cause panic, and that there's not a cross in information that's being shared, and that your team is very well prepared to know how and when to respond based upon the intel that they're receiving from the watchmen in the congregation. Next slide, please. Are we ready for the next slide, please? Thank you. All right, so let's talk about the fundamentals of church security. At the core of effective church security are the fundamental building blocks that every congregation should consider. The first step is to establish a comprehensive security plan that addresses the unique needs and vulnerabilities of your congregation. Now, the best way to begin to assess the needs is to have a comprehensive risk assessment. This can be done in a variety of ways. Most churches have to have, all churches have to have insurance, right? Most of your church security companies, church insurance companies are going to have some type of checklist for risk assessment. Very basic, but it's a starting point, right? Homeland Security also has a very extensive checklist for risk, but there are also organizations that exist who understand churches, who understand security and risk, and can come in and do a plan for you. The Watchman Project is one, but there's many. Do your research and see who's out there. And if you feel like, hey, we want a live interaction with someone who can come on site, who can walk us through giving us the risk assessment and then giving us a strategy, then make that investment. It's a worthy investment to make. Let me just share this. A lot of churches who are starting to think about security, they don't understand that it's an investment. It's a worthy investment. I was speaking with a pastor who was considering bringing me in to do a risk assessment and come up with a strategy for his church, mega church. And I know I keep saying mega church, but this is for all churches. It doesn't matter if you have 3 people that come to your church or you have 3,000 people that come to your church. You have to be thinking about security. But I was working with this mega church, and when I told him the cost, it's an investment, the cost to do this risk assessment, he was more focused on paying off the mortgage of the church. And I said, I understand. You want to pay off your mortgage, and you should. And I think that's great. But God forbid you have a crisis. You don't have a security team. You don't have a written policy on how you handle security. You haven't done any drills, fire drills, active shooter drills. You've done none of those things. What a travesty if something happens and people ask you, what plan did you have in place? Or people sue the church and they go to court and they say, show us your plans, and you have nothing to present. You would be paying out millions of dollars plus the public relation scandal that would come as a result of this. Is that worth it for a few $1,000s? I mean, and I said, I'm not going to tell you if it is or not. That's for you to decide. But these are things that faith leaders really need to be thinking about. All right. This plan should include a thorough assessment of your facility, witnessing and viewing your worship service, identifying potential weaknesses and implementing appropriate protective measures. This may include physical security upgrades, access control systems. Some of your areas need a stronger access control system. Here's a good area. Anywhere your youth and children are needs to be like Fort Knox. I mean, it needs to be hard to get in there if you're not authorized to be in there, because a lot of lawsuits that hit churches are around the fact that their kids and children are not protected and something happened to them. Your executive suite for the pastor or the leaders, that access needs to be secured, because a lot of threats come to faith leaders, especially if you're vocal about certain issues, and you don't want someone being able to walk in off the streets and walk into the executive suite, be waiting for the pastor to come in and do something. So that's just an example of areas that need to have increased access control systems. The integration of technology, such as surveillance cameras and security systems. Equally important is the training and preparation of your staff and volunteers. Regular drills, exercises will ensure that your security team, ushers, greeters, and other ministry members are equipped to respond effectively in the event of an emergency. I was working with one church, and we were talking about how they were going to do the drills, and they began to develop these instructional videos, right, for how we respond to a drill. Now, you may be saying, well, I don't have a media team, and I don't have this, that, and the third. There's so many tools and resources you can use. There now, through the use of AI, some of you may not like AI or agree with AI, but through AI, you can write a script for your drill, and then you can use another AI platform that will create instructional videos for you. The person is narrating your video. It makes it more interactive. It's a fresher look versus them getting up talking and doing it that way. Okay, so that's just something to consider. Are we having regular conversations with the congregation? Hey, if we have a fire, this is what we do. If we have an active shooting situation, this is what we do. You have to train your people as well as educate your congregation. But you cannot do that if you don't have a well-designed emergency response protocol in place. I call it if then that. That's what I call it. If this happened, then we do this. If this happened, then these people are responsible. That has to be clearly laid out with clear lines of communication, and evaluation procedure, and coordination with local law enforcement and first responders. Please, 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 if you as a pastor have not gone to meet the commander of your precinct where your church is, you need to go do that immediately. That needs to be on your agenda within the next month. You need to know who that person is. They need to know who you are. You need to know where your nearest firehouse is, how long it takes for the ambulance to get to you, where's the closest hospital. You know, when I was in seminary, I was a youth pastor in seminary for the Reverend Dr. Susan Johnson Cook, Ambassador Johnson Cook. She's my spiritual mother. She likes me to preach. And the first assignment she gave me was she made me, we were in Harlem, she made me walk a 5-mile radius, north, south, east, and west, taking assessment of what was in our community. And I want to encourage pastors, you may have done that too when you were in seminary or when you first got to the congregation, you took stock. If you have not done that, you need to know where's the nearest hospital? Where's the nearest police precinct? Where's the nearest fire station? All those things are part of better securing your congregation. And by establishing these fundamental elements of church security, we can better create an environment that's proactive, prepared, and resilient in the face of potential threats. All right, next slide, please. All right, so let's talk. Yes, she is wonderful. That's my mom. All right, let's talk about the Watchman pipeline, okay? Now, the Watchmen, again, are everybody that is involved in securing your church. They may not have the primary duty for protecting the church, but by virtue of what they do, they are a part of it, okay? So I call this a pipeline because a part of the challenge is that these areas of ministry are not talking to each other about security. They may talk to each other about the service and the flow of service, but they're not necessarily talking to each other about security, right? So let's look at what Some of these people are. That's your ushers. Some ministry call them first impression ministries, greeting ministries. I call it the people from your parking lot to the pulpit are part of the Washington pipeline. Your ushers, your greeters, your parking attendants, your intercessors. If you have intercessors in your church, people who pray and watch for your church spiritually. If you have prophets in your church, prophetic people, mental health professionals, security professionals, anybody that is engaging with those that's coming in and off your property and your building, your children's church workers, all these people are part of that pipeline. And you should establish a security council, which has representatives of each of these ministries, and they need to meet regularly. At first, it may be regular, maybe once a month, but once you get a protocol in place, you get a written plan in place, and you get a rhythm, a synergy, then it may become a quarterly meeting, but you still have ongoing communication throughout the months, but you have a strategic meeting to assess where you are quarterly, just as a suggestion. All right. You also have specialized trainings. And through these trainings and provisions of essential resources, which means, I know you're hearing me, you saying, Dr. J, this sounds like a lot of money. Not necessarily, but you do need to think strategically in your budget. How much of my budget needs to be allocated to security? And you need to discuss with the people who help you to set and to manage your budget to also understand why security needs a significant line item in the budget. So that when it's time to do things you need to do, it isn't a conversation about, well, it's not in the budget. It has to be in the budget. Security has to be a line item in your budget. If it's not, then you're setting yourself up to be reactive, unfortunately, if something happens, versus being proactive. So if you have the funds there, you can train your people. You can bring in people you need. You can get the cameras. You can get the access to certain areas. You can make sure you have the proper software to protect your computers, to protect your equipment. But beyond all of this, we have to foster a culture of shared responsibility, where every member of the congregation understands their role in safeguarding the house of God. And when we harness the diverse gifts and talents within our churches, we create a powerful network of watchmen, each contributing their unique skill and perspective to the collective security of our community. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so that's all I have. I didn't go in too deep because I wanted to be able to answer questions for you. So I see there's some questions in the chat. I'll jump over and see if I can answer. I just saw a flash of a question around federal. Yes, there are federal grants through the Homeland Security. Okay. Now here's the thing: a lot of faith leaders are struggling decoding the instructions. I've gone in and read them. It makes sense to me. Um, the way that the federal money works is that you have to apply. There is a state agency that correlates with this federal agency. You have to enroll with that state agency. It's all on the website. You can go to Homeland Security for security for houses of worship. Tons of resources there. It will tell you what the state agency is and how to apply. You have to apply to the state. So the money, if you get federal money, it's not going to come directly to you. It's going to go to that state agency first. And then the state agency will determine if you qualify. Now, here's the thing with the money they're giving on the federal level. You have to be able to demonstrate that your congregation is a big risk to be attacked. So it can't just be, oh, let's see if the federal government will give us money to put cameras on our property. They're not probably going to give you money to put cameras on your property unless you can really prove and demonstrate our congregation is a big risk to be attacked for these reasons. And if you can prove that and demonstrate that, then you have a better chance of securing federal funding. Okay, so I hope I answered that question for you. If there's any other questions that you all may have, I'll be glad to answer. Let me go to the chat, see what I can see here.
Hey, Dr. Jackson, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, loud and clear.
Well, first of all, I just want to thank you. It's 12:35 here in Texas, and you've laid out some great information. And here at SBC 21, I want to put a quick tag in. We're about to really get every Black congregation to be 100% voting congregation. And man, now you have me thinking, if we have congregations who are civic engaged and fully devoted to voting, they become a risk and a target. So just say a little more about that. I want people to vote, but we have Tosca Medlock Lee, who's on the call. Tosca is with our Office of Social Justice and Transformation, and we want to get the Black church to vote their conscience. But as we talk about voting, using that prophetic voice, man, that makes them a target. So now more than ever before, our churches need to get secured in their thing with the church. So just say more about that, just to the people.
I'd be more than glad to. Yes, we have to understand that now having a particular political bent, it's become divisive. And it's sad that it's the case. We should be able to have whatever political conviction we want or have without the threat of being harmed. But as the society becomes more divisive, people are becoming more demonstrative in showing their disagreement and disdain for opposite sides. And it can be violent. It is often violent, right? And so if you, as a faith leader or as a congregation, are going to be vocal about voting or even speaking truth to power, your truth to power, there may be people in your community, and here's the other piece, Doc, they can live somewhere else. And if you live stream your service, you have to understand that social media and the internet has changed the game.
Yeah.
People can live in East Bumblefield in the middle of a cornfield and be looking at your service in a city and don't like what you're saying and can feel like God is telling them. So let's bring in the mental health piece. God is telling them that it is their duty to remove your voice. They can get in their car and drive hundreds of miles to you with the intention of doing what they feel God told them to do.
Wow.
And so it's very important. And here's another thing with that too. Be aware of the halo effect. When we think about Mother Emanuel, what happened there? I watched the documentary, I watched the story, I've been there many times. I've taken groups of Black and white leaders there to understand what happened. And not only the history of Mother Bethel, but what happened there. And one of the things that's very clear is that when Dylan Roof came into that congregation for Bible study, they were just glad that they have a young white boy. I'm not trying to be offensive. They were just glad to have a young white guy come into the service and didn't think anything of it. And, we as a people are very welcoming people in general. We're glad to have diverse people come. We want diverse people to come, people that don't look like us to come. But we must also be discerning and aware when something that we're not used to seeing shows up. It has to be a both and. And we as a people, I say this a lot, Doc, we have to shift from this either or worldview to a both and both persona worldview. We are not a either or people. It's not our worldview. And we're trying to fit ourselves into this either or. Meaning, you can be both welcoming and watchful. How many of you have gone into a store and when you walk in, they say, "Hi, how you doing? Can I help you?" They're not just asking you that to be to provide customer service. It's also a security strategy. They're saying, "I'm here to help you, but I'm watching you too, in case something happens and I need to respond." And we need to incorporate that into our congregations.
So, Dr. Jackson, be wise as a serpent, but harmless as a dove.
Harmless as a dove.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Man, somebody just asked a question. Do you have a link or a website for the federal funding? Is there a link or a website for the federal funding that you just spoke of?
Yes, if you go to Homeland Security, if you Google Homeland Security, Houses of Worship Security, it will pull up the information for you. It's a lot of information to look at. You can go in there and take a look and filter through. Again, a lot of people are like, "Oh, federal funding." I'm telling you, if you cannot, and I'm not trying to discourage you, I just want to tell you the truth. If you cannot demonstrate very clearly that your congregation is a threat to being harmed in a significant way, it is challenging to get those funding. So then that raises the question of, well, where do we get money to do this? All right. You have to really encourage your congregation to think about the important role that security plays now. And they
Yes.
have to continue to give and sow in such a way. And then those who are in charge of determining the budget for each year needs to also understand that security needs to have significant funding in your budget. Just
Wow.
like other areas that historically have had low budgets need to go up. I'm gonna tell you another area that we often have not given a lot of money to in our budgets is to our youth programs. Because our youth are getting hammered left and right. They're the ones being most impacted by gun violence, domestic violence, drugs, and they are often the ones who are committing mass shootings. So we
Wow.
need to make sure that our line item for youth ministry, children and youth ministry, is healthy, as well as our security budget. But we
You,
put other things higher up on the list because
wow.
we think that that's more important. And I'm telling you that if you don't begin to think more proactively and out of the box around what you're investing in youth, what you're investing in security, and here's the third one, what you're investing in outreach. Because if you take care of your community, they will take care of you.
Awesome. You've brought up so much stuff, Dr. Jackson, and the intersectionality between mental health and church security, man, that I knew about it, but I didn't see how they intertwined. But man, I tell you, I really, really like how you brought that out. And right now at SBC, we are really pushing for mental wellness with clergy and laity, and we want the Black church in particular to have a healthier congregation dealing with mental health and emotional issues. So would that make a congregation, if they have a mental health ministry, would that qualify them to get funding from the Homeland Security?
No. What's going to qualify you to get funding from Homeland Security is if you say, hey, we have white nationalists that burn crosses on our property.
Gotcha.
They have come into our services with guns and threatened to shoot the pastor. They haven't done it, but they've shown up in our services. Something to that effect. I'll share a congregation. Here's an example. I work with a congregation. I'm actually helping them to work on their grant. It's a Black Jewish congregation in the Midwest. Black Jewish congregation in the Midwest. Not Hebrew Israelites, Jewish. These people are Jewish, but they're African American. And they were getting threats. People were putting swastikas on the outside of the synagogue and making all sorts of threats. Walking in the synagogue in certain places that were not secure and causing disruption. They are an example of a candidate. Let's talk about a church. There's one church that I work with whose pastor is a very vocal political person. If I said his name, you would know him. Very vocal political. And as the election has gone along, has been very much in the forefront of a lot of the political things happening. There have been, I spoke to his admin team, and they said the cyber threats have tripled. The cyber threats have tripled. Wow. I told them they need to apply for this because he's going to become a target.
Wow.
So that's what I mean. But should you put a mental health ministry in your church? Absolutely. Yeah. Your people need spiritually grounded, professionally trained people that they can talk to about their mental wellness and well-being. And if you don't have that in your church, there are community partners where your people don't even have to go there in person. They can have these sessions on their phones. Yeah. But you need to build those relationships so that you can refer. Because honestly, as a pastor, you know this, Doc, from Pastoral Care Counseling, really, you're limited as a pastor unless you are a certified mental health professional. Right. After 3 sessions with somebody, you need to be referring.
That's it.
You need to be referring. Yeah.
This is so good. Do we have any other questions? Because I have a plethora of questions, but I wanted to hear the questions from the community. Are there any other questions out there that you see, Dr. Jackson or Tosca? You see any questions out there that we want to lift up?
Yeah, Tosca asked a really great question. Okay, said many small churches may hire off-duty police officers on Sundays only. Do you recommend a more comprehensive approach? Absolutely. That's a great start to have an off-duty officer. And I encourage people, build relationships with your law enforcement agency. Even if you can afford an off-duty officer, most zones or precincts or whatever you call your area have what is called a directed patrol. They may not call it directed patrol, but when I police in Atlanta, we call it directed patrol, which means an organization, a house, a church, or whatever can call the department and say, listen, I'm going away or there's a suspicious activity around my church, can you have an officer come by and just sit for 30 minutes?
Wow.
And we would go and sit. It's called a directed patrol. If you
Mm.
build a solid relationship with your church and with your beat officer, because usually that beat officer is the same person. Say, hey, can you just come through here on Sunday mornings from 10 to 11 and just sit or
Just
just
hang
kind of
out.
drive around and
Yeah.
hang out?
Yeah.
He'll do that, but you got to build a relationship.
Love it.
In addition to hiring an off-duty police officer on Sundays, you definitely need to do the risk assessment. What other risks do you have, right? Do you have a technology breach? Is there an access? When I go to churches, I walk around their property. There's so many doors on the back that's open. They may have sheds that's open. All sorts of things happening on your property. You need to do a risk assessment. And then from there, you'll have a full picture of what's happening. And then you can devise a plan from there.
Hey, we got another question. It says she put in the chat earlier examples of assignments for the pipeline. My church has hired officers. What would you suggest for ushers, etc.? So she's talking about
Exactly.
the
Great
pipeline.
question. Great question. So first of all, you have to bring those leaders together to talk. As a pastor, as a faith leader, you need to establish a theology of security. What is your theology of security? You need to think about what that is. You need to share that with this team. And then you have to empower them to come up with the strategies needed
Yeah.
to materialize or manifest that theology of security that you
Theology
have.
of security.
You
Wow.
need a theology of security.
I
I
love
tell
it.
you, who helped me come up with that. I challenged one of my friends, Dr. Jamal Bryant. I've done some work for New Birth, and I kept pressing him. And he had a meeting with all of his watchmen, and he released his theology of security, one of the best theologies of security I've heard today.
Love it.
Right?
Love it.
So, yes, you need that. But here's the other thing. Once you get them together, they need to start meeting and talking about what are the current threats, what are the things that they're seeing, and what can they do to increase the communication. You have to create some communication strand where these people can communicate in real time about real threats and then have time to debrief worship to understand this is what we're doing well in terms of security, and these are areas of opportunities that we need to be focused on as we move ahead. So that's an example. The biggest
That's,
thing is being watchful. Remember, I told you, be
yep.
hospitable and watchful.
Yeah.
That's what ushers can do. Yes.
Love it. Love it. Yeah. We usually resource churches 100 or less. And those are considered small churches, but every small church needs to have a massive plan. And I love what you said, be hospitable, be watchful. And someone asked a question. So 3 simple things a church can do to train their parking lot and greeters team. So you said be watchful, have a plan, to communicate. Would that be 3 simple things?
That's here's another thing I want you to do. You really need to train them on signs. What are we call it in policing furtive movements, which means there's certain things people could do that could let us know they're about to do something that could hurt me.
Say it
And so
again.
you
What
need
kind
to
of movement?
furtive,
Furtive.
Furtive, furtive
Furtive.
movements, meaning,
Gotcha.
like for instance, if I pull somebody over and take them out the car and he pull his pants up, you know what that means? He's gonna run.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
hiked his pants up because he's about to run. And so
Gotcha.
being like, okay, I know what he's trying to do. So I'm already on top of him. I'm gonna grab him. He's not running anywhere. So one of the things you can do is to train your parking lot and greeters. These behaviors are typically not normal. These behaviors are typically should raise your flag, not to assume that they're going to do something that can hurt you, but it needs to raise your antenna and say, okay, we need to keep extra eyes on this person just to see. And they can go up and, hey, good morning, how you doing? Go up and greet them. And you greet them in a way that says, you're welcome, but I got eyes on you too.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. We got so many questions in the chat, but you talked about the halo effect, the intersectionality between mental health and church security. You've covered a lot, and I really like how you pulled out Ezekiel, the Watchman, Ezekiel 33. What would be some final things? We got about 10 minutes left, but I want to just kind of take about maybe 5 minutes. What would you recommend right now for that pastor who said, you know what, I trust the Lord. I know scripture, and I know no weapon formed against me shall be able to prosper. God has me covered. What would you say with that? What's the responsibility and the stewardship for that pastor for his or her flock? And what would you say that pastor right now? Why is this so important? When someone says, I can't afford to tithe, you can't afford not to tithe. So what would you say to that person right now who needs to have a plan in place, especially going into November?
I would say to you that the Bible says first natural, then spiritual. To spiritualize security is irresponsible.
Mm.
It's not godly. It sounds godly. It's the form of godliness and I am the power thereof. You have to be able to put feet and hand to your spirituality. So the watchman is an example that the spiritual practice of watching has physical ramifications.
Wow. Man, that
And
is so, go ahead.
yeah. So, and one of the things I challenge the Black church with is we can't be so heavenly minded with no earthly good.
Right.
And that's what a lot of people want us to be that way so we can remain oppressed. But if we really realize that we are empowered by the gospel of Jesus, that we're finding very practical ways to implement and to live out our faith and our theology and what we preach.
You on a whole nother webinar now, brother. But look how you tied it together. Man, that is awesome. So, Dr. Jackson, man, this has been so rich and so a wealth of information. How can someone connect with you to learn more about church security? Do you have a email? Do you have a website? Because they need to hear about risk assessment and even setting up a security ministry in the church. How can they connect with you?
Yes, so I have a website called thewatchmanproject.com. I'm putting it in the chat right now. Thewatchmanproject.com. You can go there. We just launched it recently, so please forgive if there's any errors or things. We're just launching it out because the demand is so great over the last several months.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So thewatchmanproject.com is the website. You can reach out to my team at info@thewatchmanproject.com, and someone from my team will respond.
Great.
It has what we do in terms of, so our church security initiative is called the Shamar Initiative, which is securing houses of worship against the multitude of risks. And Shamar is the Hebrew word for watchman. Okay? Shamar is the Hebrew word for watchman. So that's our church security there. You can check out more about what we offer, what it costs to get these things. And I encourage you, if you can invest, do it. You may say, hey, I'm a small congregation, but I want to invest, but I cannot do that. I will work with you because it's important. Doc, it's so important. This is so important to me. I'm willing to negotiate my prices. That's how important it is.
That's awesome.
That churches get these assessments. Yeah. And also with smaller churches, something else that I offer is if you can get a group of pastors, like 20 pastors together, and you invest a couple of $100 a piece to come together, I will come to you and do a 4-hour workshop. I'll go more in depth for you. If you will host and get these pastors to register, I'll even do a free assessment for you.
Wow.
Right?
That's
awesome. Another thing that I offer. So you can get like 20 pastors to get in your area, smaller church pastors. They invest a couple of $100. That's how much it costs to go through this 4-hour workshop with me. I'll come out. I'll do this workshop with them. I will talk to these pastors. And if you host and get these pastors to register, I will give you a multiple $1,000 assessment for free.
Amen. Wow. I don't know about y'all, but free 99 always sounds good to me. But this is something, and I believe what you're giving is priceless. It's priceless. One thing I want to say, Dr. Jackson, is right now you have really taken security for the body of Christ to a whole nother level. And we have probably about 6 minutes, but I want to bring Tosca on this air because we want to let people know what's coming up next. But one thing we need to do is we really have to make sure that we get people connected because we have this big thing coming up with getting churches to be 100% voter engaged. And I want to make sure as we push this, that we are also giving them the tools to be protected. So I have a level of responsibility on me now that you have really pushed me on. But as we come together, I want to make sure that we have we've covered all grounds. So Tosca, if you can come on and let them know about what we're talking about with this voter engagement, and then what do we have coming up next?
Hi, and thank you so much. And Dr. Jackson, that was really important. I'm a part of one of those historic congregations in Dallas, Texas, St. Paul United Methodist Church, where we're 150 years old. And we are blocks away from Robert Jeffrey's congregation, First Baptist, that was just set on fire. And so burned down their historic sanctuary. And so, you know, that kind of began to raise some questions in our own congregation, you know, being 3 or 4 blocks away and being the only Black church downtown Dallas. So I appreciate all the information that you shared, and definitely hope someone in leadership was on with our church, but I'll be passing this information along. But I am pleased to be here and to share information about the United Methodist Strengthening the Black Churches Biennial National Summit on Mass Incarceration and Social Justice, of which we will be really taking a deep dive into civic engagement and voter responsibilities and that sort of thing at our annual biennial conference. So we're going to be in Kansas City, Missouri on October the 3rd through the 5th at St. James United Methodist Church, pastored by Dr. Emmanuel Cleaver III. And also we'll be having a pre-summit intensive on October the 2nd, where we'll be doing a lot of amazing work, really trying to equip and empower and bring awareness to congregations, lay leaders, pastors in the Black church specifically, about what it means to really engage in mass incarceration, preventing the prison pipeline for cradle all the way to students and women and girls who are impacted by incarceration, you know, as well as what it means to be the hands and feet of Jesus as it relates to our brothers and sisters who are reentering. So for those of you who are not engaged in this work of social justice and in mass incarceration in a strategic way at your local congregation, this is the place for you to be in order to get training and development and tools to be able to do this. Very, very reasonable conference for you to attend. The registration right now is only $199. And it's also, again, located in Kansas City. So for 2.5 days, we're going to have experts. We're going to have directly involved persons. We're going to just really engage in what it is and how you can lean into this work of ending mass incarceration and social justice. So I am going to drop the link to all of the information where you could find that information at sbc21.org, but I'm gonna drop the link directly. And I really, really want you all to consider making this investment for you to come, or for you to bring your team members to come out and to learn more. You know, one of the things I think about the Black church specifically, oftentimes we know that some of our Anglo brothers and sisters are inside the prisons, they're doing the work, but there is a work that we need to do with our youth and our young adults. And what we're finding is that a lot of our young adults who are part of other movements like the Black Lives Matter movement and several other movements are engaged in this work. And so we really want the church to be equipped with being involved with this work. So I want to thank you for your time. I especially want to thank Dr. Jackson for that important information. And I want to invite you to attend the National Summit on Mass Incarceration and Social Justice.
Hey, Tosca, I'm going to jump in. Well, I'm sorry, Dr. Boyd, but
go ahead. Come on in.
Dr. Jackson, one of my friends and colleagues in ministry. I'm super excited that he was able to share today. But as we end today's Lunch and Learn, I just want to remind you to be looking for next month. 2 things will happen next month. One, we will be talking on our third Thursdays about end of year giving. And the second thing is we will be announcing a second Lunch and Learn, a second way that we can share with you through webinars. And that will be on empowering your church, proven fundraising strategies. And that's going to happen on second Wednesdays. So there we go. We have our third Thursdays, our normal third Thursdays at lunchtime. So make sure you bring your lunch for that. And then if you've joined our mailing list, you will get an email on second Wednesdays. So we got some good stuff coming up. Really hope this helps to get you set up for your future. So Dr. Boyd, I'm gonna let you sign us off because we got back-to-back meetings today. And everybody has to get moving.
Candy and Tosca, thank you for the information. But Dr. Jackson, thank you for this information that was inspiring And I believe it's going to be transformational for our community. So with that being said, please go to check out, we have www.watchmanproject.com or info@thewatchmanproject.com for more information with Dr. Jackson. Dr. Jackson, thank you for the theology of security. Man, that blew my mind. This has been rich. For those that ask, will we have this? Will be online. This will be on our website on Tuesday. So please share with your congregation and communities, because know that you cannot go without having security in your church. And with that being said, may God bless you and may God keep you until we meet again. God bless you all.